The other day, I was cleaning out my room, and lo and behold, I found a bunch of old dusty notebooks that I hadn't seen in years. So I abandoned my quest for cleanliness in favor of a trip down memory lane and started flipping through those yellowed pages. And as I did, I began to notice two distinct groups of notebooks. One set was color-coded with pastel pink, blue, and green and were embellishmed with my old elementary school. They had meticulously copied vocabulary words with textbook definitions and translations between Chinese and English. The other set was from our middle school days. They had pattern covers and were laced with multicolored discussion notes, sketches, and lots of paraphrasing. It was as if those two stacks of notebooks belonged to two completely different people. That is what I'm here to talk about today. Not the different notebook cover designs, but rather the differences between the Hong Kong local and international school systems. DSEs or SATs, A-levels or APs and IBs, teacher-led or student-led. We hear these terms thrown around a lot, but what do they actually show about these systems? So first you have the standardized tests, diplomas of secondary education or DSEs for local schools, and scholastic aptitude tests or SATs for many international schools. Students in local schools study for DSEs in a highly structured manner for several years, and it is unforgiving in its lack of second chances. On the other hand, you have the SATs, in which the students study in their own time either alone or with tutoring services in the manner they see fit. You can take it as many times to get the best possible score. Now this shows one major difference between the two systems, as in one we see less student control and room for mistakes, whereas in the other we see more flexibility and room for growth. Another major difference is the class environments. While it varies from school to school or teacher to teacher, there are general trends that are specific to each system. Local school classes are very much teacher-led, with dictations, memorizing, and constant practice, with very little room for discussions, presentations, or creativity. Now, this differs greatly from the international school systems, where we can learn not only from our teachers, but also from our peers. But these differences go beyond the classroom. Not too long ago, I was hanging out with my friends from AIS, and as we discussed our childhoods, I remember being stumped when it was my time to share. Not because I didn't know what childhood was, but rather because I realized how all of theirs varied so much from mine. And yes, I had birthday parties, snack times, sleepovers, and all the rest. But I also had a jam-packed schedule full of extracurriculars. And no, I don't mean after-school clubs that align with our interests. I mean classes after school for swimming, piano, art, dance, and more. I mean tutors who would come to my house just to make sure my homework was done perfectly. I mean having to eat in the car as we raced from Kumon to YMCA. Now I no longer have the hectic extracurriculars I once did, but I can still see a lot of advertisements all around Hong Kong that promise certificates or diplomas that supposedly prove that, oh, I won't drown in the kiddie pool, or that I know 2 + 2 is 4, or that I can play hot cross buns in perfect tempo. Armed with this newfound revelation about my childhood, I decided to confront my mother. Mom, why did you put me in so many classes as a kid? I asked, sounding smug and prepared for an answer that I could easily argue. Because everyone else was doing it, she answered without even looking up from what she was doing, really. Because everyone else was doing it. and she's not wrong. A local school is much more centered around competition than collaboration, unlike international schools. In local schools, we have public rankings of students for their performances and demerits. Here we have a valedictorian and most valued team players, and a focus on group work. In local schools, I often thought of the higher scorers as someone to beat. Here, I think of our higher scorers as peers to learn from. Now, I no longer have a small army of tutors or a slew of classes because my current education no longer calls for it, and my current mindset of learning with my peers does not call for it. Yes, there is still competition, but it is not really unhealthy. And yes, there are still extracurriculars, but they are the ones chosen by me for my passion and not for me for some superficial idea of being the best student in my class. If you haven't figured it out by now, I don't go to a local school anymore. And while I'm comfortable now, I remember how jarring it was to switch from a local school to an international school. I noticed smaller and much more intimate class sizes with group seatings instead of columns of isolated tables. Instead of stiff wooden or metal furnitures, I was greeted with space, beanbag chairs, and even a sofa. I never knew learning could be comfortable instead of a painful interfere. I found an actual community through extracurriculars and group studyings, and realized that studying can be actually for me and not just for the sake of good grades. Well, it seems that I've been pretty negative about the local school system. I know that it does work for many, and it's even preferable for many. I've been privileged enough to get a taste of both the Hong Kong local and international school systems. So to everyone who's watching or listening, the choice is yours to figure out what works best for you or for your kids. Maybe you want something more traditional, or maybe you want something more innovative. Or maybe like me, you opt for a bit of both. One education, two systems. Thank you.